Hello and welcome to the third video in my confession where I go over how I needlessly bullied a bunch of people on Twitter over a stupid fighting game and my pure genuine regret that I feel for doing it. I am not doing this to earn sympathy. I'm not doing this to have people feel bad about me. I'm doing this because I cannot stay silent about it any longer. And admitting to everything that I've done to these people is the right thing to do. This is very likely going to be the longest video in this series because there is a lot to go over in 2023 compared to in the previous years and potentially compared to the next years as well. It was an awful year for me, and as a result of that, I want to go into as much detail as I possibly can, explaining everything that happened to me in 2023, explaining everything that I did in 2023, explain certain things that I've talked about previously in my videos and have people understand why things are the way that they are when it comes to how I look at certain media. This should go without saying, but once again, please do not bully or harass anyone that is mentioned in this video. I keep everyone that I mention in these videos private and anonymous, but even then I would rather be safe than sorry. Do not go out of your way to find these people and harass them about this whole thing. I would rather they forget about all of this and they just completely forget about me and my existence. It is for the better. With all of that said, let us proceed forward. Throughout 2023, Disney's reputation would continue to take a massive nosedive, perfectly aligning with the at the time growing resentment I felt towards the corporation over this stupid character making it into this stupid fighting game. I looked at it as the ultimate form of revenge. I looked at it as the perfect example of karma. Disney getting exactly what they deserve. As most of you know, 2023 was the 100-year anniversary of Disney, and it was quite a disastrous 100-year anniversary. Maybe at one point, if I decide to continue making videos after these confessions, one day I'll make a video going over this anniversary. But it was a disaster that is already in the history books. Every movie that Disney would put out in 2023 as part of their 100-year anniversary would either flop critically or commercially, or most of the times they ended up flopping in both aspects. The only exceptions to this were Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 and, to a lesser extent, Elemental, and that was it. There were a lot of movies that flopped or underperformed or even straight up bombed at the box office for a multitude of reasons, but it was incredible looking at how many of the 2023 box office flops came from Disney. This was also tying in to a growing movement online regarding the main art form that Disney used to be known for: animation. At the 2023 Oscars, Guillermo del Toro's adaptation of Pinocchio won Best Animated Feature over Pixar's Turning Red, and in his award speech, Guillermo went on about how animation is cinema, animation is not a genre for kids, animation needs to be respected more, that sort of thing. And it's respectable stuff. It's stuff that I agree with, but I want to disagree with it just because of the impact that it would end up having. With these three simple words, Guillermo del Toro would unintentionally ruin the reputation of the art form that he was trying to convince people to take seriously. Many people online took these three words as gospel, and thus the animation is cinema movement was born. And I'm sure at some point it was actually like a good thing. People respected it, people treated it seriously. You had people going on about how movies like Into the Spider-Verse and Puss in Boots: The Last Wish are masterpieces, and I agree with that stuff. Later that year you had Across the Spider-Verse coming out, and that movie was a masterpiece, and that ended up getting tied to the animation is cinema stuff. I'm sure at some point this whole thing was good. The animation is cinema stuff. And then it got fucking carried away for no reason, to the point where you had people that believed animation was the only thing in the world that mattered. You had people that thought some guy at Warner Bros. Not liking cartoons was the biggest problem in today's society. You had people getting way too fucking obsessed over this art form. People were developing parasocial relationships with an art form, and I was among those people, regretfully. Now, a big part of the animation is cinema movement was criticizing Disney and like looking at them unfavorably compared to other movies from other animation studios. There's a lot of things that contributed to this. As I mentioned before, the perceived decline in quality from recent Disney and Pixar movies when compared to other movies from other animation studios, and arguably more importantly, their live-action remakes. Around that time, in early 2023, Disney announced a live-action remake of Moana from 2016. They were making a live-action remake of a movie that was only 7 years old at the time. Listen, the existence of this movie is really fucking questionable, and I have no idea why Disney is making it. Well, okay, I know exactly why Disney is making it, but damn, did the animation is cinema community go ballistic when they found out about this, and I was part of the problem. I made a video that did pretty well for my standards called Disney Doesn't Care About Animation, and I criticized this remake's announcement, and I criticized the live action remakes, and I went on about how Disney is like a terrible terrible company, not a person. Well, okay, Disney being a terrible person might not be incorrect, but we're not going down that rabbit hole. I went on about like, oh, the animation is cinema, animation is not a genre for kids, whatever. It's so cringy looking back on it. Good God. Throughout 2023, I went on and on about this whole animation is cinema stuff, specifically targeting Disney, specifically criticizing Disney, and going on about how they sucked and how their movies were bad and whatever. And I mean, okay, yeah, you know, their movies are not very good. I'm not going to defend them or anything like that. I'm not going to defend like Wish or Snow White and be like, no, they're good movies. Y'all are wrong. I'm not going to ignore the terrible things that Disney has done as a company and defend them for it. I'm not a corporate shill, okay? I'm not a bootlicker. You know, I'm retracting the animation is cinema bullcrap. I'm doing a complete 180 with it. That doesn't mean I'm going to become a bootlicker and I'm going to start worshipping Disney for every little thing they do. I already made that mistake with Rockstar Games. There is not a single chance in hell I will be doing the same mistake with Disney. The internet was collectively hating on Disney for a multitude of reasons, and I was enjoying every last second of it. This animation is cinema thing was like, yeah, I legitimately believed in it, but it was also like largely fueled out of spite. It was largely fueled because of how I felt towards Disney in regards to Sora joining Smash. Out of all things, that is what triggered this dislike that I had, this hate that I had towards Disney at the time. A character making it into a fighting game at the time was nearly 2 years ago, and that was what was on my mind. That was what drove me. It felt like I was getting exactly what I wanted, or at least like something else related to what I wanted. I didn't get my most wanted in Smash, but instead I was getting something else just as good. Disney's downfall. The release of the Little Mermaid remake combined with Across the Spider-Verse coming out a week or two later did not help matters out either. I just looked at both of these movies as even more ammunition to fuel my Disney hate. I remember having this whole thing of like, oh, I want Across the Spider-Verse to make more money than the Little Mermaid remake, and you know, it did, but like, does it really matter, honestly? Like, who gives a shit? You would have to be extremely terminally online to care about this, to think that this is somehow important, this is somehow relevant. But that's just what I thought. I used this whole animation is cinema thing as an excuse to just hate Disney even more. I'm sure like everyone that believed in this animation is cinema bullcrap use it as an excuse to hate Disney more. It's a cult is what it is. The animation is cinema crap is a cult. That's what it is. It's no surprise that now in 2025, if you say animation is cinema, you will be mocked. You will be ridiculed. I should condemn Guillermo del Toro for starting this cult, but instead I feel bad for him. I feel sorry for him because I know that it wasn't intentional. I know that he didn't mean for things to turn out the way that it did. And I say this with no disrespect towards Guillermo del Toro. I say this with no disrespect towards anyone that worked on his adaptation of Pinocchio. I say this with no disrespect at all, but I kind of wish Turning Red won the an Oscar instead. If Turning Red had won instead, there would be backlash from both the people that wanted GDT's Pinocchio to win and the people that wanted Puss in Boots: The Last Wish to win. But look on the bright side. There would be no Animation is Cinema. Animation is Cinema would likely never exist. That Oscar speech is what propelled it up into like being a big thing online, and it wouldn't exist if Guillermo del Toro didn't win. I'm sorry, I know this is gonna come off as disrespectful, but like, I'm just saying. Now listen, I'm not a big fan of Turning Red. You know, it's an okay movie as its own thing. If any other animation studio made it, I wouldn't care about it all that much, but for Pixar standards, no, it's one of their worst movies. I'm sorry. It is obviously a far inferior movie to GDT's Pinocchio and Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. And yet I kind of wish it won instead, because yeah, there would be more backlash from the Oscars. The Oscars would get more backlash, but there would be no Animation is Cinema, potentially. It would never happen. And I fail to see how that would be a bad thing. The most ironic thing is that animation had a better reputation when it was seen as a genre for kids. And I know that's something that not a lot of people are gonna want to hear, but, you know, it's kind of the truth, really. Animation is Cinema genuinely over the reputation of animation, seriously. I guarantee you, Guillermo del Toro feels like an Oppenheimer right now for making that comment at his awards speech. Well, okay, I don't know if I can make that joke, actually. You're gonna find out why later on. Obviously, not every animation fan is like the Animation is Cinema cult. It's a very small, but also very loud minority of the animation fandom. I'm not targeting all animation fans. Good God, no. I'm just targeting the very small group of people that they think animation is the only thing in the world that matters. Yes, animation is a great art form, but at the end of the day, that's all that it is. It's an art form. It's not this amazing magical thing. It's just a fucking art form. No better or different than any other art form. Live action is great as well. I know that's like, people are gonna hear that and they're gonna think that's fucking blasphemy, but like, you know, it's true. Live action is great as well. I've seen people just completely bash live action because of animation being mistreated. And it's like, okay, bashing live action isn't going to make things better. You're not making animation look better by bashing live action. There are certain stories that are better told in animation than in live action. But then there are also stories that are better told in live action than in animation, unless somehow you're able to convince me that The Godfather would still be a masterpiece if it was animated. Never mind the fact that there would be certain movies and TV shows that people would hate if they were animated. Like, I can only imagine an alternate universe where like Fight Club is an animated movie, and how disastrous the reception towards the movie would be. If Fight Club was an animated movie, everyone would be hating it. Everyone would be calling this movie cruel and mean-spirited and whatever. And it's like, you know, yeah, I agree, the movie is mean-spirited. But then also, like, you know, that's the point of the movie. It's supposed to be mean-spirited. In this alternate timeline, instead of having people that love Fight Club and they look up to Tyler Durden, completely missing the point of the movie, you would have people that hate Fight Club and they would hate Tyler Durden for being cruel and mean-spirited and whatever. You know, people would be comparing him to Mindy Kaling, Velma, that sort of thing, while also completely missing the point of the movie. I know this might come as a bit of a surprise, but you know, there's a pretty big difference between Fight Club and Blue's Clues. You know, there's a very huge difference between the two. Very huge. Bro, imagine if, like, Breaking Bad was a cartoon. Oh my god, bro. Imagine if Breaking Bad was a cartoon. I think about that scene where Gus Fring threatens Walter that, like, oh, he's gonna hurt his family and whatnot. And it's like, if this was in a cartoon, people would be calling it mean-spirited and whatever, even though that's the point of the damn show. And I'm not gonna lie, it would be the funniest thing in the world to see. Now, as I mentioned before, I made a lot of videos going over my, you know, the animation is cinema and all that stuff. I made 3 videos back in early 2023 that have since been removed called Everything Wrong with the Current State of Animation. And I went through several different things that were going on in animation at the time. The then recently released Velma, for example, the large amount of reboots and revivals, the lack of original cartoons, the fact that there were several cartoons that were getting removed from different streaming services, especially HBO Max, the live action remakes that Disney was putting out, as well as the then recently announced How to Train Your Dragon live action remake, which I thought was amazing. I don't f***ing care. Get mad, animation is cinema weirdos. Get mad. And then the entire third video was just dedicated to me focusing on Disney exclusively, criticizing Disney, criticizing like every aspect of them at the time. It was the first of many rants that I would make on Disney at the time. And I guess most of it, again, was like valid to an extent, but the problem was that I treated it like it was more important than it actually was. I'm specifically highlighting this third video because I ended up making a really f***ing awful mistake in that third video, and it will haunt me for the rest of my life. For the first time, I made my frustrations surrounding the For Smash community on Twitter, I made that public to YouTube. I made that public to my YouTube channel. Near the end of this third video, I went on about how, like, okay, there would be good things if Disney never existed. You know, the sequel trilogy would never exist, for example, and, you know, stuff like that, blah, blah, blah. I had this whole belief at the time that, like, Disney was the reason why the animation is a genre for kids stereotype exists, which is, you know, that's a f***ing take right there. That's a take right there. And then briefly, I brought up, oh, you know what? Kingdom Hearts wouldn't exist if Disney never existed. And then I went on about how I hated Kingdom Hearts. And then I dropped the bomb. I went on briefly. I went into it in vague detail about, you know, Sora being in Smash and how that pissed me off at the time. If this was like a one-time thing, you know, that would still be really bad, but like it wouldn't be the worst thing ever. But just you wait. Just you wait. I believe around the same time that I made the Everything Wrong with Animation Nowadays series of videos, around that same time, I was writing down a twit longer. Now, for those who don't know what a twit longer is, basically, you know how Twitter has, like, limitations when it comes to what you're allowed to tweet? Like, you have a certain number of letters that you can tweet out, like 200 letters and that's it, or something like that. And if you exceed that number, you cannot post your tweet at all. Well, what Twit Longer allowed you to do was write down extremely long tweets. You could write down a tweet as long as you wanted it to be, and then you could publish it, and then you could like share it onto Twitter for your followers to see, that sort of thing. And it could be like anything really, a twit longer. It could be used for anything. And I ended up having to use it for malicious intentions. Twit longer no longer exists. Ever since Elon bought it, I guess it just ceased operating. And if you go onto twitlonger.com, it says something that's like, oh, we're coming back. Something big is coming back very soon. And it's been like this for a year, if I'm correct, and nothing's come out of it, so I really doubt TwitLonger is ever going to come back. Thanks for that, Elon. Thanks. But I used a TwitLonger to write down an extremely long venting rant where I went over everything with the For Smash community, everything that I went over in those first two videos that I made of my confession. I went over them in this TwitLonger, but with one massive difference. In that TwitLonger, I made myself out to be the victim. I treated it like these people were the villain, and I was the innocent, poor little soul who was constantly getting mistreated despite doing nothing wrong. Because I knew that they wouldn't find it naturally, I ended up adding some of the For Smash accounts to see it for the second time, and once again, these people were confused as hell as to what I was complaining about. A lot of them were making good points that I should have listened to. You know, these people were going on about how I was too obsessed with like GTA and Rockstar and I should move on and focus on other things. Really good advice that my fragile ego could not handle at the time. And so I just looked at this as more proof that these people hated me. Throughout that TwitLonger, I constantly complained about how these people, quote-unquote, didn't give me any help or anything like that during what I thought initially was my lowest point in late 2021. And I started antagonizing them because of that, regretfully. The response that I got from the For Smash community regarding the TwitLonger ended up causing me to do something that I regret so heavily to this day. Again, there's a lot of things that I regret about this, but this one I regret significantly more. I made one of the worst mistakes that I ever made in my life. In early April of 2023, I uploaded a video called My Experience in the For Smash community. It was like an hour-long video, and essentially it was just like the TwitLonger, but in video form. Everything that I went over in my first two videos of this confession, I went over in this video, with the difference being I made myself out to be the victim of this story in that My Experience video. This is easily the worst video I've ever made on YouTube, without a doubt. And I've made a lot of videos that I'm not proud of, but like this was a video that I made with bad intentions. This was a video that I made out of spite, out of hate for these people. And I fucking wish every single day that I never made these videos, because believe it or not, yes, I would go on to make more of these videos, but you're gonna have to wait for that. Eventually, after I was able to make things right with these people, I keep alluding to it, but indeed, I did eventually apologize to these people. One of the first things that I did was just delete that video and the other videos that I would make following it. I just deleted that video, and that was it. It was gone. The sad thing is, I have a feeling somewhere out there exists an archive of that video. Someone out there has re-uploaded it. Someone out there has a copy of that video. I would go on about how I don't want this video to see the light of day again because of this, but like, I know what the Streisand effect is, and I realize there's not really much that I could do if this video has been archived somewhere and like, you know, someone has a copy of it. There's nothing that I can do about it except just, you know, just accept the fate, I guess. Accept that, yeah, this video will forever haunt me. This video that I made. On a slightly funnier side note, I have to bring this up. Around like May of 2023, I think it was in April, I think it was in May, I don't know when it was one of those 2 months. I remember I came across a video recommended to me from a YouTuber named Deadwing Dork. Now, Deadwing Dork is a channel where he makes YouTube videos. He mostly streams, but he also makes YouTube videos where he goes over weird people that he comes across on the internet. And one of these people they looked at, he ended up making a video on it. It's this video called Unhinged Mario Adult Screams at Kids and Family Guy or something like that. It's like an hour-long video. The video has like almost 600,000 views, so there's a chance that some of y'all watching this have seen this video at least once. And the video is him, Deadwing Dork, looking at this guy, this like cartoon YouTuber. And again, I have to make this extremely clear: do not harass anyone that I mentioned in this video. Do not harass Deadwing Dork, and do not harass the person that Deadwing Dork is reacting to in this video. But anyways, he's looking at this cartoon YouTuber, I guess, that like he criticizes stuff like Modern Family Guy. He criticizes like Batman and Robin, specifically Mr. Freeze, you know, stuff that's like, these videos were uploaded like early 2020s. I don't know when, but like by the time they were uploaded, it was like, yeah, we know that Family Guy isn't as good as it used to be. We know that Batman and Robin is bad. You know, it's not really like, you're not exactly treading new ground here. You know, there's nothing new that you're really adding to the table with these two discussions. I'm sorry, I cannot imagine hating Batman and Robin in the current superhero movie landscape that we live in. I'll admit it, I've never seen Batman and Robin, but I seriously f***ing doubt it's worse than Thor Love and Thunder or Ant-Man Quantumania or The Flash. I really doubt it, I'm sorry. And as for Family Guy, well, imagine hating Family Guy in a post-has-been hotel and post-hell of a boss world. Couldn't be me, baby. Couldn't be me. What made him interesting, though, was the fact that this guy clearly had anger issues of some kind. He would scream at the top of his f***ing lungs over stuff that was just really insignificant and not important at all.
This is without doubt the worst twist villain I've ever seen, as he's on the same level as the Paul Blart Mall Cop twist villain!
Why is this guy mad at the villain from f***ing Turbo and Paul Blart Mall Cop? What the f***, bro? What the hell? I know I shouldn't be laughing at this guy for having temper issues, considering the fact that I have temper issues as well. Even if I'm able to control them better, that doesn't mean that I should joke about this stuff. But like, you know, it is absurd. You got to admit it. And then what was easily the highlight of this whole thing was Deadwing Dork would react to this guy making a 2-hour-long rant on these 3 random kids on the internet over some stupid bullcrap, some like insignificant bullcrap. I don't remember what it was. I bet you it was related to that f***ing like Mario puppet show for babies that grown men are obsessed with for some reason. And so throughout this video, this guy is going on screaming at the top of his lungs about these 3 kids over some random bullcrap that doesn't matter, and he keeps referring to them as like heartless villains with no background checks or whatever. And it's like, it's such a f***ing absurd thing to see. It's one of the strangest things you will ever see on YouTube, easily.
They are all dumb idiots with no story, no motive, no reason, and no background checks.
Oh, I think this is some good stuff, chat.
And therefore cannot be considered legit people. There's just nothing positive I can say about these guys.
And I remember watching this video for the first time, watching Deadwing Dork's video, and thinking, wow, this is so funny. This guy he's reacting to is so weird and cringe. You know, why is he screaming at children over nothing, you know? It's like, it's so f***ing ironic, isn't it? I had enough self-awareness in me to know that what this guy was doing was wrong, and yet somehow, just somehow, I completely lacked the self-awareness to know that I was doing the exact same f***ing thing to the For Smash community. I mean, granted, my video on them was not as unhinged as this video, but, you know, it's still, still. And looking back on that, it just makes me regret making that video even more. I just briefly wanted to bring this up because I thought it was like an interesting coincidence. The fact that I failed to see the irony was like, you know, that's kind of funny in like a morbid way, but generally it's not super funny. So we fast forward into May, and once again, morbid curiosity gets the best of me. Now, as I mentioned before, all of this started just because the main character of Kingdom Hearts made it into this stupid fucking fighting game. As I mentioned before, when Sora joined Smash, I had never played Kingdom Hearts, and then I ended up playing Kingdom Hearts in early 2022, and I ended up hating it for very poor reasons. I made 5 now removed videos poorly documenting every problem that I had with the game, if you can even call them problems. I also mentioned that I got both Kingdom Hearts 2 and Kingdom Hearts 3 as well, in addition to Kingdom Hearts 1. And it was around this time in May of 2023 that I started getting really fucking curious as to what Kingdom Hearts 2 was like. I saw a lot of people say that this game was significantly better than the first Kingdom Hearts. And you know what? There was a part of me at the time that didn't doubt it. Even when I hated the first Kingdom Hearts, I was like, okay, maybe things could improve with the sequel. Maybe things could get better. I don't know. And so one day, I finally build up the courage and I start playing Kingdom Hearts 2. I prepared myself for whatever Kingdom Hearts 2 had in store for me. I was hoping this game would be better. I was hoping it would be a massive improvement. I was hoping I could go into this game and be like, oh, you know what? This is much better than the first game. This game is actually good. This game actually deserves the acclaim that it gets. You know how I mentioned when I was talking about Kingdom Hearts 1, I mentioned I spent 10 hours playing Kingdom Hearts. I had 10 hours of playtime on Kingdom Hearts. Yeah, I maybe spent only like an hour on Kingdom Hearts 2, maybe less than that, I don't know. I went into this game purely from a gameplay standpoint. I didn't care about the storyline at all. I knew I wasn't going to understand the storyline all that much because I never beat the first game, but I didn't care. I wanted to look at the gameplay. Lo and behold, I ended up not liking the game all that much either, but I did acknowledge it as being an improvement over the first game, but it still didn't stop me from hating the game. Another one of the most beloved video games of all time, and I hated it for stupid reasons. And much like the first game, I ended up making a few videos on this second game. I ended up making 2 videos where I went into very poor reasons as to why I hated Kingdom Hearts 2. Once again, these videos have now been taken down. I would actually argue that the 2 videos I made on Kingdom Hearts 2 are worse than the 5 videos that I made on Kingdom Hearts 1, because with these 2 videos, I end up being a lot more explicit explaining the For Smash community stuff. Like, I directly reference it in the video, I directly go over it, and it makes the review even worse than it already is. I was very subtle about it in the Kingdom Hearts 1 review, and then I was just more blatant and upfront about it in the Kingdom Hearts 2 review. And I feel like that makes Kingdom Hearts 2's review even worse than Kingdom Hearts 1's review. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter, because I think these might be the worst fucking video game reviews ever made. Like, they're at least up there as some of the worst reviews ever made. Like, there are questionable reviews from like IGN or whatever that are better than these reviews. Whatever questionable review IGN has ever published, whatever review they've ever had where it's like, oh, this universally beloved game is actually bad, this universally hated game is actually amazing, anything of that sort, whatever questionable takes IGN or GameFAQs or any like GameSpot, like any like big massive game journalist, whatever, Kotaku or whatever like questionable gaming takes they've ever had, I guarantee you they're better than these Kingdom Hearts reviews. Remember back in the late 2000s and early 2010s where you had all of these like angry video game nerd ripoff channels? You know, you had like the Irate Gamer, you had Game Dude, you had the Nintendo Cube guy, you had all these people. Yeah, those are all better than my Kingdom Hearts reviews. All of their reviews. Apparently the Game Dude guy, like the guy himself, is like weird. Like there's like a whole story about him. I remember watching like a video about him. I don't know. But even with that knowledge, all of the Game Dude's reviews much better than my Kingdom Hearts videos easily. I have zero shame in saying that this
take a look at the f***ing game. This is a Nintendo GameCube game. This looks like a f***ing chocolate chip cookie.
is a much more valid criticism towards the GameCube than any criticism that I gave to Kingdom Hearts 1 or 2. I'm sure at some point I wanted to review Kingdom Hearts 3 and just get it over with, and yet that never happened. I never made any videos on Kingdom Hearts 3. I've never even played the game. I have no idea how it'll turn out. I could make a statement that like, oh, this game is probably better than the first two, but I can't because number one, this game is apparently worse than the first two. The first two games are considered some of the greatest games ever made. This third game is like a more you love it or you hate it kind of game. Also, this is a game from 2019. This is like a fairly recent game still. So it's like no f***ing duh. A game from 2019 is going to play better than a game from 2002 and a game from 2005. No duh. Also nowadays, I've just completely re-evaluated this franchise, and so now I don't see any reason to like waste my time on these games. They're not for me. I don't hate them anymore. I've just accepted they're not for me. I'm not the target audience for these games, and that's perfectly fine. They're not for me. If only I took that advice back in 2023. And so we arrive at the part that I've been dreading the most, the summer of 2023. Now, if you've been following my channel, if you've been following some of the videos that I've made previously, I've gone on before about how the summer of 2023 was by far the lowest point in my entire life, although potentially it might be dethroned by now the summer of 2025. Then again, the summer of 2025 being a low point is largely because of the summer of 2023 being a low point, if that makes sense. So in a way, the summer of 2023 still remains the lowest point of my entire life. And now you're about to find out why. You're about to find out everything. Admittedly, I'm not sure if this is relevant information for me to include, but I figure it wouldn't hurt to bring it up. For most of summer of 2023, I spent it out of town. I have family that lives in Texas, and we go there to visit, like for Christmas, sometimes for the summer, mostly for the summer. Just like at random intervals throughout the year, we go and visit them there. And we spent a long time in the summer of 2023. We spent a long time there in Texas. I want to say we were in Texas for maybe almost a whole month. Maybe it was over a month, I don't know. But we spent most of the summer of 2023 in Texas. At some point, my mom had to go out of town to somewhere else. I don't remember where, and I don't think it's relevant at all, but basically what happened was she had to leave, and I ended up staying at my uncle's house. I have an uncle that lives in Texas, and I spent around like 2 weeks living there, staying there with him. Now, my uncle, I used to get along with him very well. I used to think, yeah, he was a cool guy. I loved hanging out with him. And then that's all changed 2 years later. I found out something about him, and I didn't think much of it at the time. And then here I am now, and it's all I could think about whenever I think of him, but we'll get into that later on. So it was around this time where my hatred towards the For Smash community was just growing stronger and stronger and stronger, to the point where I started to become even more jealous of other characters that people were frequently requesting, even though Smash Ultimate had ended almost 2 years ago at that point. The main thing that baffled me at the time was the large amount of people that wanted to see Geno in Smash. Now, for people who don't know, in the mid-90s there was a Mario RPG that was released for the Super Nintendo, and it contains a lot of like original characters that never appeared in like another Mario game, besides like maybe cameos and Easter eggs and whatnot. And Geno is one of these characters. He was like one of the main characters of the game, and this was the only Mario game that he ever appeared in, again excluding cameos and Easter eggs and whatnot. And a lot of people wanted to see him in Super Smash Bros. He's become one of the most requested characters in all of Smash Bros. He made it into both Smash 4 and Smash Ultimate as Mii costumes, which did upset a lot of people who wanted to see him in both games as a proper fighter. And in 2023, I just couldn't see why people wanted this character in. My mentality was like, the Grand Theft Auto protagonists are some of the most iconic characters in video game history. CJ and Trevor Phillips, Tommy Vercetti, they're some of the most iconic gaming characters of all time, and yet they get very little like requests and demand from, you know, people that want to see them in Smash and whatnot. But then meanwhile, there are tons of people that want to see this character from a niche Mario RPG appear in Smash, even though this was the only game at the time that he appeared in. It was jealousy. That's all that it was. It was me being jealous that a niche character like this was more requested than a bunch of gaming icons. My frustration grew even stronger during the June 21st, 2023 Nintendo Direct, where it was announced that in November of that same year, we would be getting a remake of Super Mario RPG, and that just left me very pissed off for a multitude of reasons. For one thing, this game looked good. Even at the time, I had to admit it, this game looked good, and it just largely fueled my jealousy, because when I saw the GTA Trilogy remasters, when they were first announced in 2021, and I saw that they were coming out for the Nintendo Switch, I got excited because I thought this meant that, like, okay, that means they might make it into the next Smash Bros. Game, because now they're on a Nintendo system. You know, we could play Vice City and San Andreas and GTA 3 on a Nintendo system now. And then the games, well, we all know how they turned out. They turned out f***ing terribly. And I thought that just completely destroyed any chances of that ever happening. And then meanwhile, you look at this game and it looked really good. I get that the GTA Trilogy stuff was a remaster and this is a remake and they're not the same thing, but even then, this had a strong chance of being good, and it would increase the chances of like Geno making it in potentially in the next Smash Bros. Game. And likewise, I just threw a temper tantrum over the announcement of this game, over the existence of this game. I ended up throwing a massive temper tantrum about it. The idea of seeing other people happy just completely disgusted me at the time, just because it wasn't something that I could be happy about either. Something that I wasn't able to be happy about for something stupid, of a very petty reason. And so I ended up making 2 more videos going over like my frustration with the For Smash community, ranting about the announcement of this game, and going over the idiotic reason why I hated this game. I'm pretty sure, like, I think I was gonna have it be one giant video, and then I ended up splitting it up into 2 videos. I don't know. I'm pretty sure like the first video that I made on this, which was the second video overall to prevent confusion, I'm pretty sure it was made and uploaded on the exact same day that the fucking Direct was held. So like I wasted no time at all in getting this out. And mind you, I wasn't at my own home or anything like that. I was in someone else's house. I was in my uncle's house. And like, I can only imagine what it must have felt like for anyone else that was in that house. They just heard me screaming and rambling about this stupid game. And then shortly after, I made a 4th video, which would thankfully turn out to be the final one of these For Smash rant videos, where I would go on about like, oh, I'm leaving the For Smash community and whatnot. And then around that time, I also made like a goodbye thread, which was like very like sarcastic and very like woe is me-ish, for lack of a better word, for lack of a better term, I don't know. And for the 3rd time, I ended up adding these people so they could see it, because I was desperate for attention, and I didn't know how the hell these people didn't block me, you know? And then I made this 4th video going over like, oh yeah, I'm leaving the For Smash community, goodbye, despite the fact that the For Smash community had been dead since October 5th, 2021. It didn't really mean much for me to leave it almost 2 years later, long after most of the people that ran it just moved on with their lives, and they realized that this fighting game was not the most important thing in the world. I don't like my uncle anymore for reasons that I'll get into very shortly, but whenever I think about my stay at his house for 2 weeks, I just think about those fucking videos. I just think of like my immature, petty behavior, and it ruins like that, combined with this revelation that I would find out about my uncle. It would just completely ruin whatever like good times, whatever good memories I had, you know, staying there. But at the same time, it was during this stay when I ended up finding out about something relating to my uncle that I didn't think much about it at the time, but again, whenever I think of him now, 2 years later, this is the only thing I could think of. I remember we were driving around, and I guess we came across like someone had like a Joe Biden sign in front, and my uncle went on about how like Joe Biden sucks and whatever, and like he wants Donald Trump to come back. And yeah, he's a Trump supporter. I ended up finding out about that just like that. Yes, this will get into politics eventually, okay? Deal with it, okay? Deal with it. It's not political right now. It will get political eventually. If anything, I'm surprised it's taken us this long for politics to get involved in some way. Now at the time, remember, this was the summer of 2023, okay? I was like, okay, that's weird. I was a little bit disappointed, but I didn't think much of it, considering the fact that Trump wasn't president anymore, and I thought there was no chance he could become president again. And look how that turned out. Look where we are now 2 years later. Oh, but don't worry, I'll go into far more detail about that later on. As I mentioned all the way back at the beginning, this story has a happy ending that is ruined with a depressing epilogue, but we're still a long way from reaching that point. We're only halfway into 2023, and because there is so much for me to cover for this year, I'm gonna have to split up this segment into 2 parts. So this part right here, part 3, is gonna cover January to June, and then part 4 is gonna cover July to December. And then part 5 will cover 2024 onwards. Trust me, there is so much for me to go over with 2023. It truly was the worst year of my life. It truly was.